So today I'm going to be building a massive bass trap / acoustic panel for what's going to be the front wall of my setup, hopefully on the relatively cheap with things that you could just find at Home Depot. So if you're here, you're probably familiar with what acoustic panels are for, but for the unfamiliar, it's basically all about controlling the acoustics of your room. Imagine trying to listen to a pair of speakers in the bathroom. That's an extreme example, but that's basically what happens when you're trying to mix or produce music in an untreated room. You don't want sound to be chaotically bouncing off the walls everywhere, creating all these unwanted echoes, reverberations. You don't want certain frequencies to be building up out of control, because all of that comes together to create a very dishonest representation of what the monitors are actually saying. So the plan here today is to build basically a 4-foot by 4-foot, 6-inch deep acoustic panel to mount on the front wall of my setup. And we're gonna go get everything that we need from Home Depot. But first, my wife made me a latte, so. Alright, so we're at Home Depot. We're gonna get all of the stuff, which is mostly just lumber and the insulation. Fortunately, I have a bunch of screws and a way to mount the stuff onto the wall. The biggest thing I'm actually concerned about right now is the lumber fitting into my car. So here is the haul. Got a bunch of French cleats to help mount the things and a bunch of lumber. Hoping that the 8-footers fit. I only have a compact SUV. So weirdly, they didn't have the right kind of insulation. I'm looking for Rockwool Safe and Sound. They only have the Owens Corning, and the number of bats per container plus the dimensions were just not quite right. So I'm gonna have to go somewhere else for it. All right, main challenge completed. It fits, good to know. So we're at Lowe's because Home Depot didn't have the right insulation. We wanted this stuff, Rockwool Safe and Sound. For some reason, Home Depot didn't have it. Also, went to a baby shower, which is why the clothing's a little bit different. I also didn't realize how large each of these packages are. Whoa. It's not gonna fit. Got it to fit. All right, so now that we finally have everything, it's time to go home and hopefully build this thing out. Okay, so before we get into the actual build of the panel, I wanted to go over the cost of all the materials that went into the project, because it really only makes sense to go through the trouble of building if it's going to save you a significant amount of money as opposed to buying a ready-made panel. So starting off on the list, it is the insulation. This is going to be the biggest bulk of the expense. This was the Rockwool Safe and Sound. It's $80 for a pack, but I really only needed half of it. So I just put two numbers here, $80, $40. If you have a friend that needs to also build an acoustic panel, maybe you could just go halvesies on the cost. The French cleat, which is the mounting material, is $10. The corner brace was $10, and the four-foot lengths of 1x6 were $35 in total. So the total cost of this panel is going to be $95. Now, keep in mind, this is a 4-foot by 4-foot panel, which is kind of an unusually large size for a panel. Fabric that goes around the actual panel is going to be variable. You could use a used bed sheet. I've seen some people use really cheap fabric from like Joann's or Michael's. Or you could use fancier acoustic fabric. So the fabric's going to be variable, which is why I didn't really include it in the total cost here. So take that into account when you're trying to budget things out. Now, in comparison with a completed bass trap or an acoustic panel, I just kind of took averages from what's available on the market. For the same amount of coverage, 4-foot by 4-foot, so that's 16 square feet, at 6 inches deep, it'll be anywhere from like $200 or $300. One website I looked at was $200 all the way up to $276, depending on the dimensions of each panel and how many you get. So excluding the fabric, you could theoretically get or make one for yourself for half the price of what it would cost to buy one already made for you, and that's before taxes and shipping. Now, a place that I could have actually saved a little bit of money is if I bought 2 8-foot lengths of 1x6 instead of 4 4-foot lengths. So buying shorter lengths of lumber is actually more expensive than longer lengths. It's almost like buying in bulk. The reason why I went with the 4-foot lengths was because I wasn't sure if the 8-foot length was actually going to fit into my car. Turns out it does, so I know that for next time. But buying the 8-foot lengths would have actually saved me a couple of dollars. So the hypothetical cost for a 2-foot by 4-foot panel, I also want to go over this because a 4-foot by 4-foot panel is very odd. It's kind of a really unusual size for a bass trap. A 2-foot by 4-foot panel is actually way more common. So the hypothetical cost for a 2x4 acoustic panel, the 8-foot length of 1x6, if you cut it in half, you have 2 4-foot lengths, would be $13. 1 4-foot length, cut it in half, you have the 2 2-footers that go on top and the bottom, that's $9. And then the insulation, the Safe and Sound, you only need about a quarter of the pack, so that's going to be $20. And total, one 2x4 panel is going to be about $42 before fabric, screws, mounting materials, and all of that. So technically, before all the fabric, if you were to build 4 of those, it would be $168. In general, if you're going to buy a ready-made 2-foot by 4-foot panel, it's going to be about $100. If you're going to buy 4 of those, it's going to be about $400. So you will probably save a lot of money just building them yourself. Now, granted, I know this didn't include things like all the tools that are needed to build things. Aside from a miter saw, I really just used an impact driver, some drill bits, and some clamps. Oh, and I guess a drywall square. But all that in, I just had access to all of those tools. I own some of those things as well. So if you actually have a lot of those tools, this is almost like a no-brainer. It doesn't take too much time to actually build these things. You just need to have the space and the materials and tools to actually do it. Alright, so it's actually the next day. I got super busy yesterday, so I didn't get to the actual build, but I have all the materials here now. So basically everything that's on this side is what's needed to build the actual acoustic panel itself. Everything else that's on this side is just the mounting materials. And I'll have a list of all the materials in the exact dimensions right here. But basically what I have here is the acoustic fabric, the pack of Safe and Sound. There's actually enough to make 2 sound panels in this pack of Rockwool, 4 1x6s, and some corner braces to reinforce the structure. Everything else that's on this side is just the mounting materials. It's how I'm going to put the actual panel onto the wall. So I have a couple of 1x2s, a really long 1x6, and a French cleat. So I'm in a very fortunate position to have access to something like a miter saw, but for those who don't have something like this, I know that Home Depot will cut down the lumber to the dimensions that you need. I don't know if it's going to be for an extra cost, but they will do that for you. So I'm going to be cutting the 1x6s to 2 47-inch pieces and 2 47¼ pieces. Those dimensions will make sense in a second, but those exact dimensions really only work if you're specifically using the Safe and Sound product. The dimensions of that is going to fit exactly into this frame here. Alright, so now I have all the lumber cut down to the dimensions that I need, sort of. Common board is not the straightest wood. Also, sawdust is no joke, so make sure you clean up and wear an N95 as you do this stuff. Don't want that in your lungs. Alright, so now for the harder part, which is putting everything together. This is oriented exactly the way it would be if this was standing vertical. So these are the side pieces and those are the top and bottom. So the top and bottom are the 47¼ pieces. The side pieces are the 47-inch pieces here. And you got to make sure that the 47-inch piece is sandwiched between the top and bottom this way, not the other way around like this here. So the exact dimensions of the wood is going to start making sense right now. So the interior dimensions of the 47¼ inch pieces is about 45¾ inches, which is exactly 3 bats of this Rockwool across. Each bat is also 47 inches long, so that accommodates for the length of this wood right here. So in order to make sure that all the corners are nice and square, I'm going to be using these 4-inch corner braces. They came with screws and they're not long enough to go all the way through the 1x6, so I'm happy about that. Basically, I'm just going to drill tiny little pilot holes to make sure that I don't accidentally split the wood. So to make sure that all of this is going in straight and nice and square, I have this drywall square right here, and then I'm just clamping the corner brace right here with a couple of clamps here, just to make sure that as I make my marks and drill my pilot holes, everything is actually in the spot that I actually want it to be. Also, I'm doing this on the floor because I don't have a bench that's big enough for a 4-foot by 4-foot project. All right, so the corner brace here is done. I'm also going to add a couple of screws going in this way, so I'm going to add some pilot holes there, and then just add a couple of short screws. I don't have anything longer than that. All right, and that's how the first corner turned out. The hardest part was just adding the countersinks, and I don't think I actually did it right, so hopefully it'll look better on the next corner. So here's another unexpected challenge. When the wood is so cheap that it just comes really warped like this, so the thing is not actually sitting flush. I'm gonna see if I could just clamp the hell out of it and see if I could just straighten it out, and we'll see what happens. All right, success. That looks way better than what it did a few minutes ago. Hopefully I'm not gonna pay for it on my last corner right over here. All right, and all the corners came out way better than I expected, so the frame is basically done at this point. So next I'm just going to put a little bit of backing onto the thing so that it seals the insulation from the back side. I'm going to add the mounting cross piece, and then we'll add some of the insulation. All right, so this is how the back is looking so far. Looking nice and tight right through there. And then I'm going to add this cross piece, this 1x2 here. This is to create a little bit of an air gap behind the acoustic panel. The French cleat is going to go somewhere in there. So this is just going to be 12 inches down from the top of the panel. All right, and that's how that looks right there. Time to just trim this up and fill it up with a little bit of insulation. So you know those really heart-sinking moments where you felt like you took everything into account, you spent a lot of time carefully planning and calculating everything, but something just doesn't go right, or you didn't account for something, and like the entire project is basically scrapped or off because of it? Well, this is not one of those moments. Everything basically fit perfectly the way that I was planning. Actually better than what I was planning. This it's actually fitting basically perfectly to the depth of the 1x6 right here. So actually went better than expected. Sorry for the roller coaster of emotions right there. Basically one of the last steps here is to wrap this in acoustic fabric and essentially just seal it up, and basically that's everything. So let's just do that here.
All right, so this is what the back looks like right here. It might look a little bit messy, but since it's on the back side, I'm not too worried. And this is what it looks like after I cleaned up and vacuumed the front side.
All right, so that's basically a wrap on how to build out the acoustic panel itself here. So this thing is kind of enormous for what it is. Acoustic panels are usually not this big unless it's like a dedicated professional studio. So this is going to be on the center of the front wall, which is actually going to be that wall. There's just a bunch of shelves and everything there right now, so I'm gonna have to clean that up before I mount it. Mounting it is going to be a whole nother ordeal, so that video is coming up at some point, but today was basically just all about the actual build right here. Now, this is going to be the center. As you can see, I do have other more normal sized acoustic panels like these. These are 4 inches thick. I'm going to have one of these on either side of the larger panel, so it's going to span a total of 8 feet across the front wall. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to arrange the rest of the panels in the room yet. For sure there's going to be corner bass traps on the front wall. That's almost always a given. I do need to build a cloud for myself so that the ceiling isn't going to cause any problems, but for right now I think that was basically a full day. So if you want to see how I'm going to actually mount all of these onto the wall, I think I have a pretty good solution. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to at least somebody, and it gives at least somebody an idea of how to go about planning and getting the materials and actually building out bass traps and acoustic panels. So thanks.